Hello class, this is a short lesson introducing macroeconomic modeling. This lesson is really designed for the 505 class where there's macro and microeconomics in the same course. So in the micro models, they were all about individual firms and individual consumers. The macro models, on the other hand, are about the whole economy. So here's a list of variables that you would have seen in a micro class. The price of the product, unit sales, number of workers, price of substitutes, wages, all micro variables, microeconomic variables. And then these, the general price level, national income, the unemployment rate, the inflation rate, and gross domestic product would all be variables that you would see in a macro class. So it's easy to get these mixed up, and I've seen students do it this way. Some of them will think of it like micro, like a microscope would drill down to the individual agents in the economy, like the individuals or the individual firms, and macroeconomics is more pulled back and looking at the whole economy. So let me get my image off of here, and this will get a little cleaner. So then just keep straight that these variables over here on the left are all associated with micro modeling, microeconomic modeling, and these variables on the right associated with macro models. So I hope you find that helpful. Then the next thing you need to become aware of is, unlike in microeconomics, in macroeconomics there is a lot of tension between different camps of economists who think different kinds of models, very different kinds of models, best describe the economy. So in this class we're going to focus on three general types. The first type is classical equilibrium models, and in these models markets clear really quickly and efficiently, and oftentimes because of these assumptions the best course of action is to just sort of wait and let the markets do what they need to do. Then the second kind of models that we'll study are also classical but more dynamic oriented. These are models where market signals direct consumption and production decisions. No one really says that markets don't do these things, but in these classical dynamic models this is emphasized, and they're not so much about equilibrium, they're about the process of signaling and directing resources to one place or another. And then the third type we'll do are Keynesian models, named after John Maynard Keynes. And these are models where the assumption is that markets work poorly, and we can have long periods of non-clearing markets, or in the more sort of popular language, long periods of painful unemployment and lackadaisical economic progress. And in these models government intervention is needed to solve the problem. Now I don't want you to think that these are the only kinds of models that there are. There are really lots of others, and I'm not an expert in all the different kinds of models that there might be. Here are four that I'm just kind of aware of and I could think of really quickly, but the truth be told that there's many competing macroeconomic models, and all we're doing in this class is considering these three sort of generic and very common types. Alright, so the next issue we have is how to introduce these competing macroeconomic models. And all the books do different things. Most books use one of these two methods. Some books combine somehow the competing models. So they'll take like the classical model where the economy comes to equilibrium very quickly, and then they'll take the Keynesian model where markets don't work very well, and they'll somehow try to blend them together, and they'll have some compilation of those two models, and they'll call it maybe a classical Keynesian synthesis. So that's one approach that you see in textbooks. Another approach is to present the two dominant models. So they'll talk about the Keynesian model as a short-run solution to economic problems, and then they'll choose the classical model if you have a more long-run view. So I'm not going to do either one of those things. Sorry. I think it's does a disservice to the models to try to force them into cubbyholes like that. So for me, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to present I'm not going to present one model as a truth. I have my ideas about which one I think is the best, but really they're just my ideas. So I'm going to present all three models in their purest and simplest form, and then I'll leave it up to you to decide which model does best. But to get a good grade in this class, all you really need to be able to do is to understand and articulate each of the three models. So if you can do that, if you can sort of get your head inside of each of the models and try to see why people might think that model is correct and others are incorrect, if you can do that, you'll be in good shape in this class. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in this little short lesson is the variables, the macroeconomic variables. And there's hundreds of them. I listed a few in that earlier slide, but in my class we're only going to concentrate on these 5. So don't be left with the idea that this is the only 5 that there are. No, there's lots more. But these are kind of 5 common ones that you see in the media often. And here's what you need to be able to do for each of these to get a good grade. You should know where to find the current data on the web for each of these. So should you ever have to look one up, like what's the current unemployment rate or the current consumer price index and so forth, you should be able to know where that is on the web. Be aware of its current value if I ask it to you on a test, like I might ask you, hey, what's the current value of gross domestic product? And I wouldn't want you to get it exactly right, but you should be able to get within about 10% of the true value. Know how to interpret and analyze critically the data. So a lot of this data is out there on the web, and you should be able to understand what it is and be able to interpret it in just general form. And then also be aware of the professional critiques of the data and the data's usefulness. So I see I've numbered those weird. Look at that, 1, 2, 3, and 3. Should be 4. But in that last bullet, that number 4, what I'm really talking about is each of those variables has some detractors. In other words, there are people who will argue that the consumer price index poorly measures the inflation, or the unemployment rate poorly measures the true unemployment in the economy, and so forth. And you should be aware of those professional criticisms of the data, and you should be able to speak about how useful the data is. Okay, so that's it for the macro stuff, and here I am again. So good luck in this last section of the course, and let me know in the discussion boards if you have any issues with the homework. All right, see ya.